asato ma sadagamaya tamaso homaham jyotir gamaya mrityurmam amritam gamaya avir maedhi rudra yathe dakshinam mukha te namaha pahinityam. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality, and reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. So my subject this morning is the spirit birds. And I'm thinking back about our monastery in Olima, California. 2,000 acres, surrounded on three sides by Point Reyes National Seashore. A beautiful women's retreat house, men's retreat house, and a big old barn which served as the workshop and the quarters for the monastery. And as you go into the barn, there is a mezzanine. You have to walk up the stairs, and that formed the small dormitory for some of the monks. And I remember that there was a painting hanging on the wall. It was a bird. It was called a plover, the great Pacific plover. It's a remarkable bird because it nests in Alaska and often flies during the winter season. It flies south over 1,200 miles nonstop to nest in Hawaii. And there's other things about this species of plover bird. But for our story this morning, all that I remember is that it was a very drab and unlikable picture. The colors were, well, it wasn't clearly, distinctly even a bird. Deep oranges and browns. It was an ugly picture. And so when time came for spring cleaning, some monastics had the idea, why don't we take this and see if we can get rid of it? Maybe we can sell it. And we knew that it had been painted by a man named Morris Graves, but we didn't know anything about him. So one day I took that painting down to the Hoover Gallery on Market Street and walked in, hoping to get maybe a few dollars for our very spare monastic library. I showed him the painting and mentioned the name of Morris Graves. And the curator took one look at it, and he whipped out his checkbook from his back pocket. And he said, I'll give you $700 for it. And I was so stunned. I was so delighted. I was so amazed. I immediately agreed. I got that check, and I walked out feeling very successful. It's only a little later that I learned how naive and how uninformed I was. The Morris Graves was since passed away, of course, but been long before. He had been a disciple of the Swami in charge of the society, and he'd taken initiation. And he was a lifelong student of Zen Buddhism. And in fact, he had become a very well-known painter, recognized internationally, exhibited in national museums, and regarded as a model for a new genre of art that was appearing on the West Coast, which had certain mystic themes. And in fact, later on, we see that Morris Graves, one of his focus of interests was mystic themes. And for those, to illustrate those and portray those, he would paint these birds. And I can still visualize one bird there. Bird looking at light, bird seeing light for the first time. And there's a little bird, he's looking around a corner of a dark room into a lighted room. Another one is bird walks across the earth. And as you look at it, he's kind of transparent. He kind of becomes one with the earth. They're very Vedantic paintings. And they were compiled in a book by the New York Graphic Society, which we can see and understand our subject this morning, the spirit birds. Now that's our theme. And so let's just look at the words. Let's look at the word, the spirit birds. What is the spirit? Well, the spirit is just yourself. You are the spirit. That is, you're not just the body or the mind. That is, you look deeper into your nature, discover that you have an essence. You have a nature. You have a soul. And of course, Vedanta doesn't just say that you have a soul, but there is a soul of your soul. And that's called yourself. And yourself is just your I consciousness. It's just who you really are. We could call it the spirit. And this is the teaching of Vedanta philosophy, that you are the spirit. It's not that you have a soul, but that you are a soul. But that you are the soul of your soul. That is the witness of your psyche. And that you have a self called the Atman, which is your true nature, which is infinite spirit. So that's the first word, spirit birds. Now, what more of a natural symbol could we imagine for the spirit than a bird? Think about a bird. Well, where does a bird live on the earth, in the gross plane? Does it live in the water? No. It lives in there's gross, subtle, or causal. It lives in the air and in the space and flies high in the air. And in fact, ether is the element of ether, and air is the symbol, is identical with the bird. The bird is a natural symbol of freedom. Where does a bird live? Does it live in an apartment somewhere? Does it live in a house that's surrounded by four walls? Go out and get into an automobile to get somewhere and strap yourself in? No, a bird doesn't have all those constraints at all. He flies free. He's free as a bird. And so that's think about animals, of course, walk on the earth. They speak as we do. Dogs bark, cats meow. What do birds? Birds sing. They sing melodious songs. And that's their nature. And hence the bird is a very graphic symbol for us, for the symbol of the spirit that is our soul, our true self, the Atman. Now let's look here at the bird and just kind of visualize maybe how it does illustrate the source of our being, how it illustrates the whole cycle of our spiritual life, and how it illustrates enlightenment. That is our true nature. In ancient times, there's, in ancient India, there's the legend, kind of a myth and a legend of the Homa bird. The Homa bird flies high in the sky, and in fact, she never lands on the earth. Whole life is spent flying in the air and high up in the sky. In fact, her natural habitat is not the troposphere or the mesosphere or the stratosphere or the ionosphere. Rather, her natural habitat is beyond that, some ethereal exosphere. Flies effortlessly and eternally, and one day she gives birth to lays an egg. And that egg is so full that the egg begins to fall. And it begins to fall and fall. Pretty soon it reaches terminal velocity. Maybe it's falling at 60 miles, or 60 feet a second or something. Oops. Just visualize it. Yeah, it's going down. But it's so high up that as the egg there begins to warm, the friction begins to warm the egg, and the little bird inside begins to mature and grow. But it's all that time, going down. And as it gets warmed up, pecks at the egg. Pretty soon he pecks his way out, comes out into here's the rush of the upper atmosphere. At first he's completely blind, doesn't see even where he is. But as he continues to fall, his eyes open, and he sees that he's falling down and down. Well, he doesn't even know it's down, but he looks up, he sees the sun. He looks over, he sees some clouds, and he looks anotherwhere, and he sees something vast, earth, coming up towards him. And as he falls and falls, his wings grow a little stronger, and he turns and looks at the sun and the clouds, and finally zeroes in on the earth as it looms, and he realizes that he's going to be dashed to pieces. And at the very last moment, he makes a U-turn. And with a cry, he spreads his wings and returns to his mother in the sky. Now, why did that Homo bird turn away from this world? Well, it's because he saw something that maybe we don't see. That is, we live our lives looking through rose-colored glasses. And we see all the good things, and sometimes we don't see the other side. But that Homo bird immediately saw what Lord Buddha called the 3 signs of being. First sign, all is suffering. That is, the question is, why did he turn away? Why did he, well, he realized that on the earth, all is suffering. First sign of being. What does that mean? Well, it sounds extreme. But when we think about the infinite bliss of nirvana, then we can think, yeah, well, relative to that, it's true, happiness, all happiness is kind of, maybe could be called suffering. But that's a very difficult teaching there of Lord Buddha. All is suffering. Maybe we would prefer to think, okay, there's happiness and there's misery. There's pleasure and there's pain. It's kind of more would be kind of a more balanced. And students of Vedanta, well, maybe we would agree with that. Assuming that you accept the doctrine of Maya and you understand that everything is a coin that has 2 sides. And yes, there are things which are just happiness. There are units of happiness, but if we turn it over on the other side, we see that it's also suffering and pain and misery. And you may say, well, but isn't it true that couldn't we just kind of use our discrimination and separate the good from the bad and just focus here? Let's just forget about the 2 coins. Let's just focus on one side. Just focus on the happy moments. The problem with that is the second sign of being. And that is that all is transient. Everything comes and goes. Everything that happy things happen to us in our life, and we can enjoy them. But they come and they go. And just as people come into our home, we meet them, we enjoy their company, and then they leave. Maybe we're sad to see them go. And all is transient. And then you may say, well, we're trying to understand what this little bird is thinking about the nature of the world. You may think that, well, okay, it's transient, yeah, but couldn't we just get a lot of very short, happy moments and just string them all together? Or do we have one after the next? And then there'd be no problem. The problem is the third sign of being. And that is that everything is empty. As King Solomon realized in the Christian Bible, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. That without God, without soul, God, and higher truths, that everything in the world is an empty box. And that everything, as Solomon says, all is futility. These are the 3 signs of being discussed, recognized by Lord Buddha. Well, you may think, well, that's kind of extreme, but maybe we can think about it a little bit. So the bird has flown, saw the nature of this world, and decided no, to return to its mother in the sky. that it's his goal, realize his goal and his destiny was a higher truth. And this is the teaching of the whole Vedanta philosophy. That higher truth is your natural state. That is your home base. That you are by nature, you are a divine, immortal soul. That you're not the body, that you're not the flesh and blood body, born, grows old, and dies. You're not the mind with the waves of thought and feeling. You're not the person, the persona that you think that you to be, the role that you play in the melodrama of life. That in your real nature, in your true nature, you're not the body, the mind, but you're the spirit. The spirit is not physical. It's metaphysical. The spirit is not of this world. It's transcendental. The spiritual self is not personal. It's transpersonal. In fact, it's impersonal. And because the spirit, by definition, is unlimited, it's immaterial, it has no boundaries, and therefore there can be only one spirit. There can be only one, that is, the spirit is by definition infinite. It has no limitations. And therefore, there can only be one. There couldn't be two. If there's a second, then one would limit the other, and that would be illogical. So there's only one spirit. That is yourself. That is your Atman. That is your true nature. The spirit being infinite and being one, it's often called, referred to in a technical phrase in Vedanta. One only without a second. It's one only without a second. There's only one infinite being. There can't be two infinites. One would limit the other. And because it's infinite, it contains within itself everything. That is, you, in your true nature, as the Atman, contained within yourself everything in the universe. Time, space, and causation, and name and form. Everything is contained within you. And therefore, it is natural that your natural condition is to be fulfilled, to be complete, and to be perfect. That's the Atman. That's Brahman. That's the ultimate reality. That's your true nature. Now you may say, well, yeah, that sounds good. But, I really don't feel like that. I don't feel infinite. I don't feel unlimited. In fact, I feel very constrained and very limited. And often in the face of the infinite world, I feel very small. And it's true that the saints and sages realized in ancient times, it's true that it's almost like we have two selves. There's the higher self, the Atman, and then there is our everyday walking around, conventional ego self. And saints and sages illustrated this in the ancient times in the Upanishads. And we can read in the Shvetashvatra Upanishad, for example, the imagery of well, just imagine you're walking through a forest, tall trees, maybe there's a gentle breeze that's blowing, and the branches of those trees are just trembling, and before your eyes there looms one tree. And you look at that tree, and there you see, as you look more closely, that there are two birds perched on the self-same tree. One of them is on the lowest branch, and he's hopping around, and he's looking for fruits to eat. But the other bird is high up on the highest branch of the limb, seated quietly, majestically, observing the whole forest as the witness. And as we look more closely, we can see that lower bird is very busy. He hops around, he gets one fruit, it's sweet, and he smiles and he's so happy. He pecks at another fruit, oh, it's bitter. And he feels so disappointed. At that moment, he stops and he happens to look up, and he sees that higher bird sitting there quietly, calmly, and he thinks, yeah, I wish I could be a little more like that. And he hops up maybe one branch, but then gets distracted again. And he's eating the sweet and the bitter fruits, and then he gets another very bitter fruit. And again, he stops, considers his situation, looks up, sees that higher bird, and is motivated just to hop up another branch. Again, he's distracted. And we can see that's kind of our condition. Always in pursuit of the fruits of our karma. But inevitably, we begin to see the reality and life as it is, the sweet and bitter fruits, and we begin to aspire to some higher reality. And so it is that bird, he hops up to one branch, two branches, he gets another bitter fruit, and finally, when it gets, as we look on, we can see that he's gotten very close, and at the last moment, he makes one final jump, and well, lo and behold, it seems we can't see, we can only see now there's only one bird. And we realize that really there was only one bird all along. And you know how in the forest, sometimes in a gentle breeze is blowing, the leaves are moving, the sunlight appears in the branches, and maybe there's casts illusions and shadows in the branches. And so similarly, there was an illusion that there were two birds, where really there was only one bird all along. So this is the teaching story of the Upanishads and of the Vedanta philosophy. The lower bird, of course, is just our conventional self, our ego. We're living life in an ordinary way, as we do, always busy, looking in pursuit of happiness. And yet, we find ourselves in a condition of suffering. But the higher bird represents our enlightened self. That higher bird is our ideal self. It's ourself after we have attained enlightenment, after we've realized the ultimate truth of life about the world and about ourself and about the world and about the nature of things. Then we become enlightened. We also have an ego at that time. Sri Ramakrishna called it the ripe ego. It's not unripe ego. That's the lower bird. The higher bird, the enlightened bird, he also has an ego, but the ego of the jnani, the ego of the devotee of God. And that enlightened higher self, our true nature, our idealized self, our self as we were when we were created in the image of God. That's how we visualize ourself. That's our true self. And what are the qualities of our true self? Well, we had that the enlightened person who's realized his true nature naturally is filled with all divine qualities. When alone, he enjoys his solitude, doesn't need television and telephone and internet access, all that. He's happy to have the time to meditate and to contemplate the nature of the universe. And when he's not alone, maybe when he's in transaction with the world, he's fully engaged and yet unattached to the fruits of the action. And when dealing personally with other persons like himself, that enlightened jnani, he feels always the feeling of kindness, empathy, sympathy, compassion, and love. This is the nature of it's the nature of our higher self. So that's the object of our contemplation, that higher bird. Notice how it is that when the lower bird, it's a metaphor for a spiritual practice. Spiritual practice is all about a vertical ascent, a movement from the lower to the higher. So we see the little bird, he moves up, and as he goes upward to a higher branch, he's also moving horizontally inward towards the central axis of the tree. That is, he's moving towards, as he ascends to a higher state of mind, he's also moving closer to his true self, closer to the center. Spiritual practice means that we're making efforts to move closer to our center. Our center is ourself. Our self is the source. It's the source of truth, of all wisdom. What, now am I going to start coughing now? I don't have a cold. I just have a catch in my throat. In any case, that's the source of wisdom. It's the source of love, that is ourself. Our center, the goal of our spiritual practice, is the source of inner peace, inner calmness. That's our ideal, is to achieve inner peace. And ultimately, it's the source of all meaning, purpose, and in life. That is, what is it that gives meaning to life, that gives direction, that gives value to everything? That is the Atman. That is your true nature. That is the spirit. Without the spirit, the world is an empty box. And therefore, as we move closer to the bird, moves higher, he moves closer towards the center, and moves closer towards his true nature. That's the source of our meaning and our purpose. That's why, although naturally we live distracted, and we seek for happiness outside of ourselves, in the end, inevitably, in the course of time, we will have to return to our true nature. We will have to turn within ourselves and that is return to the source. Once upon a time, there was a bird who, well, she was so happy. She lived there on a little coastal village, a seaport village, fly around during the day to perch on a house, one tree, all of which were very familiar. And one afternoon, she went over and perched on the main mast of a sailing ship that was docked there in the harbor. And the gentle rocking of the boat, she fell asleep. And time passed, and night came, and she was deep, sound asleep. She didn't notice that the ship weighed anchor and sailed out to sea. Oh, what was her surprise when she awoke in the morning and looked around with great consternation and perplexity. And where are my friends? Where are my trees? Where are those familiar houses? And she realized that now she was lost. She had to find her home again. She had to find land again. And so she flew off the mast, and she flew to the north. And she flew and flew hours and hours. And as she did, it got colder and colder. Pretty soon, it's getting long. There's no land in this direction. I got to return. Just in time, she turned around, flew back, and perched on the main mast. Well, that was in the morning. Rested a little bit. In the afternoon, she thought, I have to try again. I have to find land. And so she flew to the south and flew and flew. And looked there, water down, water everywhere. Down there, see the sharks circling around the whirlpools. How far can I go? There's no land in this direction either. I must return. And so just in time, she managed to return to the main mast. There she fell asleep. The next morning, would try again. And she flew to the east. And she flew, and the sun was rising. She was blinded by the sunlight. Didn't see any land. Finally, he realized she had to turn back to the main mast. She came back there around noon, rested a bit, and then she flew to the west. She flew, and as she did, the sun began to sink in the sky. It became more and darker. She realized there's no land in this direction either. So she turned around, flew back to that main mast, and there she fell asleep. And the next morning she woke, looked around. All of her, she realized that she had no plans. She had nothing more that she needed to do. She'd realized that there wasn't any land in any direction, but she was safe. She was perched on that main mast of that sailing ship. And so, feeling the wind there, she sails along. She realized that was her destiny. And she had found her true home. So there, perched on the main mast of that sailing ship, we can visualize that bird. And as we do, what time is it here? I don't have
11:42.
Okay. That bird, there she is on the mainmast. What a beautiful image it is of our higher self, of our witness self. She sees all the crew at work there on the ship's deck, and there's the waves of the ocean, the rise and the fall of the waves in all the directions. And she's perched there on that great mast. And the boat itself floating, you can't help but think of another bird, which is very familiar to us as students of Vedanta. That is, if you go into any Vedanta bookshop and you buy a book published by the Ramakrishna Mission, you'll see that it has an emblem on it. That's the seal of the order, of this Ramakrishna order. And if you look closely at the emblem, you see it's a beautiful allegory for our spiritual ideals, the harmony of all of our ideals. It pictures a lotus floating on the wavy waters of the lake, and the rising sun. Behind the blue waters of the lake, there's the dazzling sunshine. The sun rises. And then circling the whole picture, there is a serpent. And in the middle, on the lake, there's floating a swan. And, the lotus there symbolizes bhakti yoga, one of the paths of spiritual life. Karma yoga, the wavy waters, karma yoga, rising sun of knowledge, jnana yoga, different kinds of spiritual practice. The kundalini, the serpent, raja yoga, the great path of meditation. And the idea is that by the union of all of these, we can achieve our goal. And what is our goal? Our goal is to be like the swan, like the Paramahamsa. Well, we know that the swan is a beautiful bird. That is aesthetically, we see, but sages noticed in ancient times it seemed to have a peculiar ability to, as if you put water into milk, you put milk into water, that's kind of a symbolism of two things which are, in philosophy, which are mixed together, which you can never separate. It'd just be impossible to separate it. But a swan dips his beak down into the water, somehow maybe secretes a little acetic substance, and is able to eat the milk right out of the water. And so it becomes a symbol of the first virtue, the first prerequisite virtue for spiritual practice, and that is discrimination. So that bird, the Paramahamsa, is the symbol then of the enlightened self, the enlightened soul, whose primary virtue is that of discrimination, who can see things as they are, and who's realized his true nature. And we can't conclude without one more bird. And maybe we can consider it to be, that bird is like the backstory of the Paramahamsa. All of these stories that I told were were myths and legends of ancient India. But in the Western world, we also have a myth that is, it used to be part of our cultural literacy. I don't know if it is anymore. That story by Hans Christian Andersen about the ugly duckling. You remember how that duckling You remember who is it that hasn't grown up with a Walt Disney, seen the mother duckling as she hatches, or there's the eggs. The father is pacing back and forth. She hears a little pecking, gets up off the nest. Oh, there's 4 eggs. Peck, peck, one comes out of that comes a little yellow chicken is going chirp, chirp, and so happy, jumps out. And the second one cracks the egg, she comes out. And the third little duckling comes out. And then the father is waiting there, they're walking back and forth. They wait a minute, there's another egg. It's a very big egg. It didn't look like the others. They wonder, what is that? Pretty soon they wait, peck, peck. Yes, another. And who's coming out? Well, we look at that bird which is coming out. Oh, he's not a yellow. He's all kind of a gray color. He doesn't have a white beak. He has a black beak. And he's very large. And the little ducklings say that he's very ugly. Of course, the mother didn't think he was ugly, because the mother always sees the inside. But all the little ducklings and the other animals, maybe in the barnyard, that's how they began to. And as that duckling time passed, he found he wasn't very happy there in that barnyard. Everybody singled him out and made fun of him, the way that he talked. It didn't quack. Didn't quack like a duck. I don't know what sound the swans make. Some swans don't make any sound. And he was so large. And so as time passed, he thought, I'm tired of this. I'm gonna go off on my own. I'm gonna find somebody who likes me. And I'm tired of living here where people just don't accept me as I am. And so he just set off by himself, alone, looking for someone like himself. And what did he saw? First thing he saw, what did he see? He saw some turkeys. Oh, hello, said the little duckling. Hello, would you like to be friends with me? The turkeys looked at him and said, well, who are you? You don't look anything like us. We don't want to have anything. We can't assert. We're special birds. We have a whole day that's dedicated to us. People give Thanksgiving for us. We can't associate with you. Go along your way. And so, rejected. And sometimes we feel like that. Nobody loves me. Nobody seems to care. And so he journeyed on, and there he saw a pond, and on the pond he saw another duck. The duck was bobbing back and forth. He didn't know that it was a wooden decoy. And sure enough, soon there were rifle shots and gunshots, and the little duckling was so terrified, flew up, barely could fly, flew into the weeds and the tall reeds, and he cowered there. He was so frightened. He thought, I'm not going out anywhere. I'm going to stay right here. And so he did. And time passed, and the fall passed, the winter months came, snow fell. All that time, that duckling was in the cowering, huddled there in the reeds, and didn't want to go out anywhere. Time passed, spring came. And one day, as he was there, he heard overhead, he heard a sound, and he heard a splash. He looked out through the weeds and those tall reeds there, and what did he see? Was a beautiful swan. A beautiful bird. Tall, long, graceful neck, beautiful white in color, with a black beak. And as she swam along, she turned and she looked there, and She said, hello, who are you? He said, what are you doing? What are you doing hiding in here? And the little duckling said, oh, well, I'm hiding in here because don't you think I'm ugly? And she said, ugly? Well, why do you think that? You look just like me. And the duckling, he looked, what? He looked down, reflecting in the water, and there he saw, well, what had happened? Time had passed, and he'd grown, and his gray feathers had become pure and white, and he also had a long, graceful neck, and realized that he was a swan. So come along, she said, yes, come along and swim with me. And so he got up, he got off, and they swam off together. Well, so there it is. That's a good old Western fairy tale that captures the essence of the Vedanta philosophy. You have to realize your true nature, to realize your true self. And sometimes it is, this Vedanta philosophy, it may seem to us to be very philosophical, very metaphysical, abstract, and otherworldly. And therefore, what we need sometimes, we need to have some, this is the role of art and literature and painting and tales and parables of the saints and sages, that it serves the purpose of art, which is to make the concrete, the abstract concrete, to make that which is conceptual, to make it more graphic and perceptual, to take that which is very high, to make it more familiar and more relatable. And so it is as we can contemplate some of these tales and parables that we can understand the teaching of the Vedanta philosophy and move forward to realize our true self.
Thank you, Swami Vedarupananda. So next week, Swami Vedarupananda is returning tomorrow, so he'll be giving the Tuesday class. Swami Meghnad will be giving the Wednesday class, and Swami Mahayogananda will be giving the Thursday class, and I'll be giving the Friday class. And next